Another 31 days, another 31 games. There are a decent amount of solid games I played in May. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is a continuation of my Game a Day challenge. If you caught last month's video, then you already know that I'm slightly shifting the way I approach this. Instead of going heavily in detail on all these games, or heavily is a loose term when you talk about 31 games, but instead of talking about all these games, I'm going to list off the 31 games I played as part of my Game a Day challenge. For context, that means a new game every single day, new to me, a game I've never played before, with one caveat, sort of, this month. But also, I do include expansions as well. That's something I do try to include. So if I play a bunch of expansions, I let myself count expansions as one. I don't count like 15 expansions. Doesn't matter how many expansions. I get one for the base game, one for the expansions, unless they're like months apart, in which case we can have a conversation. Either way, we're getting sidetracked into the terms here. The point is, I'm trying to burn through all the unplayed games in my collection, all the games that have piled up, games that I want to love, that I bought or acquired or traded for at different points in time, but content creation has gotten in the way of these, and so I'm slowly catching up. We'll see how it goes, but right now, I'm finished with May. We have 31 games, and as I said already, contrary to the first few months in the series, I'm not going to be focusing on every single game every single day. I'm going to be focusing on 10 games or 11 games that I want to go a bit more in detail on, and the rest just going over quickly. The rest, for context, let's go ahead and go through them. We have Mountains Out of Molehills, we have Unseen Domains, we have Voyages, a print-and-play game, we have Spirit Duels, which is a prototype, we have DC Deck Building Game, which is, DC Deck Building Game, we have Planet Unknown, which I dove into. I debated talking about that one, but I already fully reviewed it, so I didn't bother. We have Knockdowns Volume 2 and 3. I already played Knockdown 1, but played Knockdowns Volume 2 and 3 already. That goes to the part where 2 expansions called it as 1. We have Mysterium Park, did not love that game. We have Super Motherload from Roxley Games, we have Juicy Fruits from Capstone Games, we have Juicy Fruits, we have Animal Kingdoms, we'll talk about it more. We have Lost Ones, we have Lost Ones from Greenbrier Games, Viral from Meebo Games, we have Veiled Fate. This is the one I'm cheating on, by the way. Normally the way it works is if I already counted a game, if I already played the prototype, I don't count the production game. I already played it. I'm not going to count it twice. And this one, though, I did. Veiled Fate, I counted as a play. I still feel like I probably shouldn't have, but I counted it because I never played a full game. I played Veiled Fate back in the day when I had a chance to dive into it, but I never actually finished a game of Veiled Fate. I dove into it a few times and never finished any of my games, and that was during the prototype stage, and so this was my first finished game of Veiled Fate, and so I decided I'll actually count it. The combination of it being the final game and finishing a game led me to go ahead and count this one. I may or may not have more content on it. We'll see. Depends if I dive into it more. We have Hero Realms. Hero Realms, I dove into the expansions for Hero Realms. Hero Realms, again, I played the original base game back in the day, dove into a bunch of expansions. Again, I only get one count. We have Genotype. Genotype from Genius Games, played that. We have Majesty of Dragons. That's going to be a upcoming game. Very, very solid game. I really enjoyed that. I feel like I probably should have talked about that more. We'll talk about it more. I liked it a lot. It's a prototype. We have Magnet the First City. I will have coverage on that separately. We have Undaunted North Africa. Need to dive into it more before I have coverage, but that is the continuation of the Undaunted series. I've already played Undaunted the original. I've played Undaunted North Africa. At some point, I'll probably count a third Undaunted when I get to it, but for right now, just those two. We have Tiny Epic Dungeons from I'm blanking on the company that makes Tiny Epic games. From Gamelin Games. And then we have the Artemis Project from again, blanking on them. The Artemis Project, oh my gosh, they make Endangered. Grand Gamers Guild. Grand Gamers Guild is the company from the Artemis Project. And that's what we have for the 20 games or so that I'm not talking about more in detail. Which brings us to the 11 that I'll touch upon a bit more. 10 or 11, I don't know exactly the count, but the variety of games that I'll dive into a bit more in detail. Starting off, and these aren't necessarily games I liked. In fact, some of these are games I'm keeping, some of these are games I'm getting rid of. It's just, for whatever reason, I picked these as games that I want to talk a bit more about. To all those who are looking for pictures, I might have pictures, I don't know. I'm slowly getting through the process of being able to have more and more pictures. I have pictures of some of these, so maybe I'll try to throw in what I can. No guarantees, though. But diving into that, Viticulture World from Stone Mad Games. Viticulture World's an interesting one to me. I already reviewed it on the channel, I already talked about it, and something I talked about in the past is I do like watching other content creators, especially after I've given my own opinion, because I like seeing where my opinion stacks up. And watching Dice Tower's 4 Squares, they gave it like 9, 9, 8, 9, I think were the ratings they gave it. Solid ratings all around for Viticulture World. I like Viticulture World. It's a arguably a 4 for me. A 4 means an 8. A 4 out of 5 is an 8. Arguably, but it might be a 3.5. It always is a little complicated. Where I tend to get lost in my ratings is the part where I'm kind of comparing a game against something else I'd rather play. It's a very, very tricky spot for me. There are areas, there are times where I've given games 4 out of 5s, and I get rid of them. Right after giving it a 4 out of 5, I'm like, this is a 4 out of 5, and then it's leaving my collection, which should not be my rating scale. The problem is sometimes a game is a 4 out of 5, but there's something that does the same thing but better for me. And that's the problem I have with Viticulture World. I think Viticulture World is excellent. I really enjoyed my plays of Viticulture World, diving into the cooperative game. Again, it's for sure, at the very lowest, it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. At the most, it's a 4 out of 5. It's somewhere in those ratings. Instinctively, I want to give it a 4 out of 5, but I'm not certain. The balance for me is the fact that I like Viticulture so much more. Viticulture is a 4.5 out of 5 for me. It's a ridiculously enjoyable game. I love what Viticulture does as an experience, and to me, while Viticulture World captures many of those same elements for me, it doesn't capture all of them. And it adds some fiddliness that doesn't feel in line with what Viticulture as an experience is trying to do. And so for me, I really like Viticulture World, and I think it's worth recommending to those who are looking for cooperative viticulture, but I certainly wouldn't give it a 9 out of 10. That's an extra level for me. 9 out of 10 is a 4.5 on my scale, practically speaking, but I was surprised to see it get that high marks. If anything, when I was instinctively giving it a 4 out of 5, I wondered if perhaps I was being too favorable. Perhaps my love for the Viticulture engine was coloring me to Viticulture World, and it's not to say that Dice Tower's 4 squares is right or whatever, or that there's some bar, but it is another data point. In fact, it's actually 4 other data points. And so I do find that interesting. It solidifies for me the fact that Viticulture World is definitely a good game. But I found it very interesting to see the praise for it, because for me, it was a game that I will never play. Like, I don't own Viticulture World. I didn't feel the need to pick it up. I played the game. Jesse and I shared a prototype. Sometimes that happens in general, by the way. Crackle Up and I, because we live so close, we'll share production copies. Sometimes it happens, sometimes not. It depends on the nature of situations. Sometimes timelines make it so that's difficult. That can result in issues. But I never bothered picking up Viticulture World because it wasn't Viticulture. And I prefer Viticulture. Moonrakers. Moonrakers over here, specifically with expansions. So I've played Moonrakers before. This doesn't count as a new game to me, but I dove into all 3 Moonrakers expansions. Now, I don't know what I'm allowed to say about all of them yet, so I'm not going to heavily dive into the ones that are a little more under the radar. What I will say is, Moonrakers was a game that I loved my first play, and I had an okay second play. I loved my third play. I had an okay fourth play. And that's when I reviewed it. And it's not a good sign for me in a game. There are other games that have hit that same mark. Endangered is right now a current example of it. Endangered is a game that is currently in danger of leaving my collection, because of the fact that I really like Endangered as well, but inconsistently so. Dogs of War left my collection because I really had some amazing plays with it, but I had some inconsistent plays. And for me, I find the problem that I run into is when a game gives me inconsistently good experiences. It doesn't matter how good those experiences are. When a game gives me inconsistently good experiences, it does eventually leave. For the practical reason that when I'm looking at games on the shelf to pick up, I can either play the game that I love, or I can play the game that I sometimes love. And I'll always pick the game that I love over the game that I sometimes love. I don't like signing up for what might be a good game night versus a great game night. Now, while that's true, every time I pick up a new game is a process of discovery in its own right. Picking up a game and rolling the die, it's not even discovery, it's just this will or won't be a good play, always makes a game at risk of leaving my collection. I said as much in my review. For Moonrakers, I said, the only reason this game is staying right now is because the expansions are coming, and supposedly the expansions address it. The expansions have certainly addressed it. Now, I need more plays, to be very clear. I only got a few plays in. I need more plays with the expansions. I need to really dive into it a lot more, because until I do, there's still that ever up in the air question mark of how many plays does Moonrakers get to a point where I feel safe with it. But for context, let's talk about the expansion that is public. The expansion that is very public in terms of what it's doing, which basically incentivizes alliances. It incentivizes teamwork. It makes it so that you're more likely to be teaming up with people when you play Moonrakers and getting more of a feeling for... Not more of a feeling. You're just more likely to be teaming up with each other. And so to that end, the expansion does a great job doing so. It basically rewards you every time you team up with others. The more people on a team, the more you're moving your little alliance bonuses and trading them in for other perks, including getting points and things at the end of the game. And so there's a strong incentive to make sure that you are spending time with others, which really makes the game shine. It means that, again, I need more plays, but I think that I will no longer have inconsistently good experiences with Moonrakers. I think. And so for right now, Moonrakers with expansions, I'll cover them more in detail, obviously, at some point, but I think the expansions have absolutely saved Moonrakers. It's put it back to, for now, it's put it back to where it was for me. We have Ark Nova. Ark Nova that I'm still waiting on my pre-order copy from Game Nerds. Played Quacklope's copy, though. And Ark Nova it's a good game. It's definitely a good game. And there's a lot of love for the game. This is one of those many times where I'm like, listen, I mean, it goes both ways. I'll sit there and I'll love a game like Terraforming Mars, and then people will be like, wow, why is it so high in the top 100? I just don't get it. I didn't like that game. And I'll be like, listen, you don't get it, that's fine, but other people do clearly get it. And then the reverse is true with other games. There's games like Ark Nova, where I'm like, Ark Nova is a great game. I really like my play of Ark Nova. I need more plays, I'll review it at some point, but I really like my play of Ark Nova. But also, it's not Terraforming Mars. Forget that. Forget not Terraforming Mars. It was a really good game that I'm not yet certain is a permanent addition to my collection. Nothing's permanent. Permanent just means that it's going on the shelf until whenever. I liked Ark Nova, but I have complaints about it too. I felt that much more so than Terraforming Mars, and there are some people who are like, why are you comparing to Terraforming Mars? And that's fine, and there are others who are like, yeah, of course you're comparing to Terraforming Mars. I fall into that camp. I understand all the comparisons to Terraforming Mars. I understand exactly why someone would compare the two games. And to that end, for me, I do compare them. We can go into more later at some other point, but I do compare them, and I feel like Ark Nova has a lot more luck in terms of drawing the right cards, especially late in the game. Luck that I find is not nearly as prevalent in Terraforming Mars, although of course people who prefer Ark Nova and not Terraforming Mars might say the exact reverse. I thought Ark Nova did a lot of things well, and I'm looking forward to diving back into it. But for me, it's not even a contest, because I've gotten this question a lot. It's not even a contest for me between Terraforming Mars and Ark Nova. Ark Nova is a game that I may or may not add to my collection, and we'll see how long it lasts. Terraforming Mars, I don't see a world in which it leaves my collection. That simple. So yeah, that's those two games. Next up from there, we have Bardsung. Bardsung over here, that is sadly leaving my collection. I'm pretty sure this video is going up after my review, but we'll see. Bardsung is a game that it did a lot of things well. And I dove into it a lot. I'm like 15 hours deep into it, 2 boss fights in, and 2 boss fights is like 15 hours deep. It's a whole lot of grind in the game. And that's the problem with Bardsung for me. Bardsung for me, and I played when I first dove into Bardsung. My first experience with Bardsung was playing a boss fight on TTS during the Kickstarter. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna get this game, and I'm gonna get it for 2 reasons. First of all, the boss fight was compelling. It was not amazing, I was very clear with that. I was like, it was intriguing, and to me, I think the promise is building up your character. That's the part I'm looking forward to in Bardsung. Also, Steamforged games hold their value, so I'm not really worried either way. On that note, I'll say, Steamforged games hold their value. This all-in pledge that, I paid like $300 for, whatever it was, it's less than that actually. It goes for like $600 on eBay right now, so it definitely holds its value. I'm not worried with that, which is part of the reason I backed it. But going to the gameplay aspect, because I'd keep it if I loved it. If I love a game, I keep it. I don't care about the price. The price is only a factor once I don't like a game. Once I'm trying to decide whether to back a game or not based on value, all that stuff. If I love a game, there is no price point. There should be, but there isn't. And so Bardsung for me, I was looking forward to the process of creating your hero, of building up your stats, of building your gear and your abilities and your all that stuff, and then diving into battle. And that is the highlight of Bardsung for me. That is the best part. Absolutely. There's lots of skills, there's lots of abilities, there's lots of stat modifiers. There's some skill and choice as far as what you choose to do at any given point, which ability you choose to use, how you build up your team as a team, not just on your own. There's a lot of that going on. But for me, the problem with Bardsung is there's too much grind. There's way too much grind in Bardsung. It makes it so that the experience that I would love to dive into more, I just don't. And there's an interesting conversation on the table as well, a conversation I'll have to have at some point, because I've been fine house ruling games in the past to get rid of grind. I've done so with Awakened Realms once? Twice? No, once. Have I done it more than twice? More than once? I did so with Sleeping Gods, briefly, but Sleeping Gods left my collection. With Sleeping Gods, I did so as well. I started getting to a point in the Sleeping Gods campaign where I house ruled some of the stuff out of the way so I can just enjoy the game the way I wanted to. I did so with Aetherfields, and I didn't do it again, but I'm prepared to do so with Tainted Grail. I know there's some conversations around the menhirs and the activation sequences of them and trying to expand it so that you can have more gameplay and less maintenance. I will happily do that if I need to. there's a real question on the table why I didn't do so with Bardsung. I'm not going to cover that today because I'm still fine-tuning why. The short answer is because I don't have the instinctive drive to. But I like defining more. I like defining the reasons why I'm not prepared to house rule. Hey, go through Bardsung and just play a campaign and then level up instead of playing like 3 or 4 missions and leveling up. Bardsung is a great experience with a lot of grind getting in the way. You can check out my review for the full deep dive into it, but it let me down. It let me down. I am very much enjoying Resident Evil 3 from Steamforged Games at the moment. A lot more than Bardsung, which is not something I necessarily would have thought, but yeah, it is what it is. Burncycle. Burncycle from Chip Theory Games. Another game that kind of went in their similar direction, but ended up in a different spot. Burncycle is a game that I also played on TTS. And I also backed it because of Chip Theory Games' reputation, and I also wasn't worried about how it would play out. But a big part of it for me was the fact that I was like, hey, this was also an experience that I was not sold on, but what's the worst that can happen? There'll be a demand for it. I trust Chip Theory Games. They generally deliver. Then I got Burncycle and went on a bit of a journey with it that was a little different than when I went with Bardsung. Bardsung started off in a high. Wow, I really like this game. And there's a lot of grind, but there's a level up, there's a lot of grind, there's a level up, there's a lot of grind. And eventually got to a point where I was like, there's just too much grind. Burncycle, on the other hand, it was more of an experience based partially around the level of work to actually understand the rules. In general, Chip Theory games have this problem. Their games are a lot of maintenance just to get to a part where you fully understand the game and you're not checking the rulebook every 3 seconds. And even then, I just played Burncycle again yesterday, and I still checked the rulebook like 3 times. Not a lot, but I checked it like 3 times to be like, okay, just to make sure that's going to be that, and that's like that, and what happens there. Just details. Details that you could house rule, you can move past confidently and check them up later. Very often I do, by the way. Very often I'll take notes during a game and do all my checking at the end. Not when I'm doing playthroughs on camera, though, because that's, or, well, sometimes yes, honestly. It's a mess. It's a mess. Rules are a messy conversation on their own. But Burncycle grew on me the more I played it. For me, I actually ended up doing something I've never done before. I rated the game differently based on player counts. Now, in general, I do comment on my preferred player count, but usually I rate a game not based on player count. Usually I rate it based on what I prefer it most at. If it's a 3 to 4 player game, but I think it shines at 4, I just rate it whatever it is at 4 for me. Burncycle, for me, my experience was so obviously broken up. The enjoyment of the experience was so obviously broken up based on player count that I felt the need to review it based on player count, which is something I've never done before. I'm sure I'll do it again. I'm sure I will. I just think statistically it's likely going to happen where I see that gap so strongly. I've commented on player counts in the past. I commented when I reviewed Foundations of Rome. I commented on the fact that the solo game was just okay to me at best. And so that was a very big drift from the other experiences, which were all in a solid range of being really, really, really good. But yeah, I like Burncycle. It's not competing for too many bones. Not yet. Not even close. But, well, I mean, arguably close. It's half a point off. But half a point when you're talking about 4.5 versus 5 is a big gap. But yeah. Caverna the Cave Farmers. I played Caverna the Cave Farmers in May. All the games I'm talking about I played in May. That's the nature of the conversation. I played Caverna. I need to get more plays in it, but I bought the expansion the day after. That should tell you something. I played Caverna almost to knock it off my list. I've had it in my collection for a year and a half, and I got it because I heard that it's Agricola but better. I had Agricola in my collection for years, but eventually got rid of it. I never loved the fact that Agricola feels like it's a fully balanced conversation. You have to have everything in balance. You can't. Too many sheep doesn't help you. Too many cows don't help you. You have to have just enough sheep, just enough cows, just enough wheat, just enough everything in Agricola, which makes it feel like I'm not playing my game, I'm playing their game, which is fine. Sometimes that's good. Lots of people like Agricola. I liked it enough to keep it for a year and a half because I love the mechanisms involved in the game. I say a year and a half, but I don't actually know how long I had it. I had it for a long time. I got it when I first got into gaming. Le Havre, for me, was always the go-to Uwe Rosenberg game, though. But eventually I got Caverna because I was like, I have to try Caverna at some point. And I got it. But I didn't feel the urge to pull it out and play it. That finally changed. This past May, I dove back into Agricola, first of all. So I dove into Agricola again because I do want to do a play this, not that, of the 2 games. But that means I want to play Agricola again because I haven't played it in like 6 years. And so I played Agricola again. It was exactly what I remembered. A solidly enjoyable experience that I'd rather play other games. Solid game. Arguably a 4 to 5 for me. Arguably. Maybe a 3.5. See, this is the problem. This goes back to that rating thing. I think I'd give Agricola a 4 to 5. It's a really good game. I just like other Uwe games that give me the same intricacies and the same depth, but without the constrictions. So I'd rather play those. Those are 4.5s and 5s. That one is a 4. And Caverna is definitely better than Agricola. I'm not 100% sure it stays forever. Sometimes these games, especially with Uwe Rosenberg games in general, I think, sometimes they fall into a pattern where I love what it does. It introduces me to something so clever, so interesting, so amazing. And then I play it multiple times and it goes down a little bit for me. the nature of Euro games in general, I do find that I have this a lot. Not with all Euro games, but with a lot of Euro games, they do go down slowly over time. But I really like Caverna. I thought it did Agricola better, a lot better. I went ahead and picked up the Forgotten Folk, the expansion, which I never played the expansions for Agricola, so maybe it's not fair, but I like the base game Caverna more than the base game Agricola, so I guess it is fair. But I picked up Forgotten Folk, have not played it yet. I want to dive back into Caverna a few times, with and without the expansion, and then I'll probably either review it or do a play this, not that with Agricola, or both, honestly. There's room for both. I really like Caverna. It's a solid game. It does what Agricola does, but better for me. And better for most people based on the ratings, but not for everyone because we're all different and we're all special. And some of us like Ark Nova, and some of us like Terraforming Mars, some of us like Brass Birmingham, some of us like Brass Lancashire, and some of us like Monopoly more than we like Blood Rage. Those people are wrong. The rest of us are fine though. Valeria Darksworn. I played Valeria Darksworn. This is more of a I want to play more kind of situation. Valeria Darksworn, I dove into the first game. It's basically cooperative Valeria. Valeria Card Kingdoms, which I really enjoy. Solid game. That's one of my guilty pleasures. It's a game that I think is lighter than normally what I would expect me to like that much, but I really do like what it does. Very, very solid game. I really like it. A lot. Daily Magic Games. My favorite Valeria game that they've made so far. And I finally played Valeria Darksworn. Finally is a relative term. I only showed up, a month and a half ago. But I finally played Valeria Darksworn. And I really liked it. I really liked the cooperative elements of Valeria, the working together to overcome the enemies. Now, my big concern is my first game, what was the first game, it's tutorial, it felt way too easy. So I hope it ramps up as I play it. I hope it does escalate because I don't want the game to feel easy, but I did enjoy tackling Valeria in a cooperative sense. And so I'm looking forward to diving into it more. I do think that, like many games, because of the fact that there's an iterative nature to the progression, I do think, like many other games in that genre, I don't know if I'll dive into it when I'm done. That's the question I have. Like Valeria, I dive into. Will I dive into Valeria Darksworn again? Will I replay the same situations? I don't know. I don't have a feel for what I'm going to do there. Because I like Valeria, I'm keeping Valeria. Will I replay? I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I really like the cooperative version of Valeria and what it added to the feeling I get from Valeria. Euthia. Euthia is an interesting game. I liked Euthia a lot. But I liked it less the more I played it. Similar to Bardsung, but in a very different vein. Actually, not that different vein. Actually, fairly similar. Honestly, pretty similar. Yeah, my experiences with Bardsung and Valeria and Euthia are very similar. Both games gave me a lot of character progression that I really enjoyed. Both games gave me enough strategy that I was compelled, but not enough strategy that I was entranced. And both games gave me a lot of grind to get to the best parts of the game, granted in different situations. Bardsung is a longer campaign-driven dungeon crawler, and Euthia is more of an RPG leveling up single-shot adventure. So very different in what they do, but they end up in the same place for me, where the amount of grind and the level of strategy involved while you're grinding is not high enough to keep me interested in the continuous build-up of the next step of iteration, the next step of building your character. Both Bardsung and Euthia got a 3.5 from me. Both of them are games that I like a lot of things, and I'm going to miss parts of them when I don't play them again, because I'm not playing either again. But also, both of them, I'm comfortable saying it's okay for them to go, because I don't like looking at games and thinking it's a chore to dive into. And so Euthia is a game that's leaving my collection, which I covered already, I'm pretty sure. And I did a review, and then I did a games leaving the collection. It's leaving my collection. But yeah, that's Euthia. It's a good game. I really wanted to like it more. And then obviously there's the Euthia drama, which is a whole different conversation and not the subject of this conversation. Anastyr. Anastyr from Mythic Games. I almost said Mythic Realms, which is an interesting combination of companies. We have Cool Minis of Mythic Realms. That'd be a fun company. The Cool Minis of Mythic Realms. Kamar? Yeah, Kamar. No, Kamar. CMMR. Cool Minis of Mythic Realms, yeah. Anyways. Anastyr. Anastyr is a game that I played from Mythic Games, from Mythic Games, and I liked what Anastyr is doing, although very much first impression stage. Anastyr felt like a Zombicide style beat 'em up game. Roll dice, move around the board, take down enemies, and it's a game that I reluctantly went all in on. I say reluctantly because I do not think Anastyr stays in my collection forever. I just don't see a way that happens, because Anastyr to me was a 4 to 5. And again, I want to see more. Prototype versus final game, so the comparison is not fair, which is part of the reason I went all in. And again, see what I said over here, their games hold their value. So I went all in on Anastyr because I liked what I saw enough, and because their games hold their value, and because I sometimes have a hard time making the right decisions. Although again, I'm selling Bardsung for more than it's worth, so right decisions is a relative time frame. Not more than it's worth, more than I paid for it. Right decisions is a relative sentence, not time frame. My sentences are all off. This is what being sick does to me. Like I'm just a drop under the weather, but it throws me off completely. Also, I'm not sick anymore. I was sick 3 weeks ago, or whenever I filmed this. I don't know exactly when. But Anastyr. I liked Anastyr a lot, but I do not see it competing with Zombicide for a permanent place in my collection. I see myself going through it. I see myself filming it, playing it, maybe streaming it a bit, figuring out what I need to do with it. I don't know. But I liked it enough. I liked the process of leveling up your characters, leveling up your characters is something we'll see more, but the process of comboing, and then choosing your own decks as you level up, and then the enemies you're fighting against, and the procedural nature of the game, of the side-scrolling beat-em-up. I liked a lot of the things that Anastyr did. But I also, unless things heavily change from the prototype to the final game, and again, they could. See Burncycle for an example of a game that the more I played it, the more I got into it. See, the downside of content creation is sometimes now that I review games, sometimes I play games more than I previously would have, because I feel I have to. And that just, it's not the end of the rule, but it's a little bit more work. The other times, I find games like Burncycle where if I wasn't a content creator, Burncycle would not be in my collection. If I was not reviewing Burncycle, I would have played Burncycle once when it arrived, said it's not too many bones, packed it up, and left. So there's pros and cons to this mindset of diving into games more. But again, it's the nature of just trying to review things appropriately. But Anastyr is a game I will dive into more. I can only call what we had a first impressions because we only had one scenario. I played that scenario 2 half plays and then a full play. That was our experience with Anastyr. So I still played a decent amount considering we had one scenario, but still, it was one scenario. So take all the opinions with a grain of salt, and the more I play it, the more I level up, the more I enjoy the process, I might find myself enjoying it more. But as of right now, Anastyr is a 4 to 5, but it's competing with Cthulhu Death May Die and Zombicide, Marvel Zombies, and Zombicide Black Plague, all 3 of which are 5 out of 5 for me, and so it's just a hard bar to beat. I like Anastyr. I don't know if it stays long term. Time will tell. And then lastly, for the games I'm going a bit more into detail on, we have Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning is an interesting one for me as well. Dead Reckoning is a game that I first played, actually the first time I met Quacklope. The first time I met Quacklope, the first game we played together was Dead Reckoning. The Kickstarter was going on at the time, we dove into it, we played it, did a film playthrough. I put together a sort of review. I don't remember if I called it a review on first impressions. I did make it clear that I only played it once, I remember that. But I don't know if I called it a review or not, but I definitely made it clear that I played it once. But it was a video based on one play. And I loved my experience. I did. It was amazing. It was a lot of fun. And I still really like Dead Reckoning. But it may have dropped a notch for me. If I were rating it back then, I probably would have given it a 4.5 out of 5. If I'm rating it today, which I'm not yet, I would give it a 4 out of 5. I like a lot of things that Dead Reckoning does, and I need to play it more. I've played it 3 times since I got it back, since it arrived physically, so I've played it 4 times total now. And those multiple plays, my first play would have been a straight up, my first play and my second play still would have been 4.5. My third play and my fourth play dropped to a 4. Just because of the fact that the game is long. The game has a cube management system that I don't love. Not the rolling dice, but there's a limitation to your cubes in Dead Reckoning as you play the game. And that limitation I find not as compelling as I would like. That limitation I find takes away from the full sense of adventuriness that I want. It might work well for balance. That part, absolutely. But it does take away from my experience of feeling open in that world. Now, we're diving into the sagas right now. We're in that process of going through the sagas and seeing where it lies for us. I may end up diving into it solo, honestly. It's the kind of game that I can see myself playing, enjoying even more solo. I don't know. I have to read the rules for the solo play. Is there solo play? I'm 99% sure there's solo play. It doesn't say on the back of this box. 1 to 4 players. There's definitely solo play. I may dive into the sagas more solo to get a feel for what else the game does. I still really like it. And it's still not going anywhere. Right behind me over there. It's sticking around. I like Dead Reckoning a lot. And by the way, the reason I'm including Dead Reckoning over here, even though I played in the past, is because we dove into the sagas. That's my expansion, count. But yeah, I like Dead Reckoning. I like it a lot. It's gone down a bit. The piratey goodness of the game is still present. The setup and tear down is not really a problem for me. It's minimal setup and tear down compared to many games I've played, and so I'm not really worried with that. I know people have complained about pulling out the cards and all that stuff, and I can see why it would bother you. Like, I would absolutely put that in the what I can see others not liking kind of category. But I really like Dead Reckoning. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure that the first review ever that I used the format, what I like, what I don't like, what I can see others not liking, I'm pretty sure I used it for Dead Reckoning. And I'm pretty sure I got some people who are upset at the things I put in what I can see others not liking. They're like, why are you complaining with that? I'm like, I'm not complaining with that. I'm saying it might be something you have a problem with. I'm pretty sure Dead Reckoning was the video that I started the formula with. Yeah. Either way, point is I like Dead Reckoning. I do. I like the game a lot. I'm curious to see whether it goes back up to a 4.5 as I continue to dive into it. It's a really, really good pirate game. It's a little long. I don't love the cube situation, but the rest of the experience is a lot of fun. There's a lot of different ways you can try to improve and strategize and build yourself and your crew up in order to get the piratey adventure you want. Whether it's being more in your face aggressiveness, whether it's area control on the islands, whether it's being a merchant, or whether it's just heavily seeking out the sagas. Lots of fun things you can do in the game. Dead Reckoning is still a solid experience. And that's it. Those are the 31 games I played in May. Some detailed notes on some of them, and little brief just here's what I played on the rest. But we'll talk more about them in some way or other. Almost all games I have eventually get reviewed or leave the collection. One of the two, eventually. I slowly go through some of my older games, especially when they just do announcements of reprints and things like Glass Road I reviewed because Capstone Games picked it up. I reviewed Castle Burgundy because they had a campaign. And I plan on slowly reviewing all my older games that are still sticking around. Any game that's stuck in my collection for 5-10 years deserves a review at some point. In any case, until next time, thank you so much for being here. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.